Elena had cleaned many rooms in the Crimson Palace, but she had never heard a sound like that. Soft, desperate tapping, as if someone barely had the strength to ask for help. She froze in the long, dim corridor, a basket of folded linens pressed against her hip. The tapping came again, followed by a muffled whimper, and something inside her chest tightened. In this palace, ruled by silence and shadows, where even human footsteps felt like intrusions, no sound came without consequence. Yet the sound was unmistakable. A child trying not to cry. She followed it to an old storage room, the one no maid ever touched unless ordered. Dust lined the edges of the stone floor. The door hung slightly open, as if whoever closed it never cared enough to check. Elena pushed it gently, letting the faint smell of cold stone and damp wood meet her. Her eyes adjusted to the dark. Nothing. No movement. Only crates, old cloths, and a narrow closet at the far end, its door trembling with the faintest vibration, like something inside had flinched. "Elena," one of the older maids had told her weeks ago, "stay out of locked places. The Queen doesn't like surprises." Elena had nodded. But now, hearing a shakier whimper from inside the closet, she stepped forward anyway. She opened the door slowly, and there, curled on the floor like he was trying to disappear, was a boy no older than 9. His pale skin glowed faintly in the faint ray of moonlight slicing through a crack in the wall. His hair was silver white, messy and tangled. His eyes did not follow the light, because they were clouded, unfocused, lost, blind. Elena's breath caught. She had heard rumors of the Vampire King's son, the boy no one ever saw, the one the Queen resented for reasons whispered but never confirmed. But she never imagined he was kept like this. But before we continue, I want to invite you to something very special. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment below which city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. Elena crouched slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Hi, I'm Elena," she whispered, her voice soft enough to calm rather than startle. "Are you hurt?" The boy flinched at the sound of her voice, but then he lifted his head slightly, sniffing the air. Vampire senses. He wasn't just blind, he lived in darkness so much that scent and sound had become his only guides. "My name is Adrian," he whispered, his voice thin and trembling. "Please don't tell her you saw me." Her. Elena didn't need him to explain. Everyone in the palace obeyed the Queen. Everyone feared her coldness, her beauty, her quiet cruelty wrapped in silk. But no one had imagined she would do this. Elena reached out a hand, not touching him, offering the presence more than the contact. "I won't. I promise." Adrian seemed to breathe a little easier, but his small hands trembled uncontrollably. She noticed bruises on his arms, faint but unmistakably shaped like fingers. Her stomach turned. "How long have you been in here?" she asked gently. "I don't know," he whispered. "She locks me when I embarrass her, when I ask questions. When Father leaves the palace, he doesn't know." Elena felt her heart clench. The king, the feared, respected ancient ruler, did not know his son was treated like this, or worse. He suspected nothing because the Queen made sure of it. She helped Adrian sit up, offering him water from the bottle she carried. He drank slowly, as if unused to the simple kindness. She wanted to lift him into her arms, carry him out, wrap him in blankets, and tell the king everything. But the palace had rules. The Queen had sharper senses than most. Every act of compassion would be noticed. "Elena?" Adrian whispered suddenly, his head turning toward the hallway. His nose twitched, his body stiffened. "Someone's coming." She froze, her pulse hammered. Footsteps, slow, elegant, deliberate, a scent of cold roses and iron. The Queen. Adrian scrambled back into the closet, panic twisting his features. Elena looked around. There was nowhere to hide, except behind the large stack of old blankets. She dove behind them, heart pounding so loudly she feared the Queen could hear. The footsteps stopped outside the room. The door creaked. Elena held her breath, pressing her hand over her mouth. She could hear the Queen's breathing, calm, controlled, cruel. A moment later, the closet door slammed open. Adrian whimpered. "So here you are," the Queen said bitterly. Trying to escape again? Elena's hands clenched, nails digging into her palms. She dared not move. She heard the queen seize Adrian by the arm. He cried out softly. "Quiet!" the queen hissed. "You know your father must never see you wandering. You ruin everything." Elena felt anger rising like heat under her skin. How could anyone treat a child, blind, vulnerable, precious, this way? She had seen cruelty before, but never with such cold intent. The queen dragged him out. "You will stay silent until I return. If I hear you tried to leave." Her voice lowered to a whisper sharp enough to cut stone. "You know what happens." Seconds later, she left, her steps fading down the corridor. Silence swallowed the room. Elena crawled out from behind the blankets, breath shaky. Adrian sat on the floor, shoulders shaking, but he forced himself not to cry. She knelt in front of him, brushing hair from his forehead. "You're not alone anymore," she promised softly. "I won't let her keep hurting you." He reached forward blindly until his hand found hers. He held it tightly, as if recognizing the first safe touch in years. "Elena," he whispered, "why are you helping me?" She swallowed. "Because someone should have." In that fragile moment, something unspoken formed between them. A bond neither human nor vampire laws could forbid. A promise, a beginning. A secret alliance growing in the shadows of a palace ruled by fear. And somewhere deep in the castle, unaware of the truth, the vampire king walked proudly, believing his family untouched by darkness. But the truth had been found, and Elena knew she had crossed a line from which she could never return. Elena woke before the first bell, her heart already racing as if it had never stopped pounding from the night before. Dawn in the Crimson Palace was a strange thing. The sky barely lightened, as if even the sun was afraid to fully rise over a kingdom ruled by vampires. The air in the servants' quarters was cold and smelled of damp stone and boiled porridge. But beneath those familiar scents, she still carried something new on her skin. Adrian's faint, metallic scent, like mist mixed with old silver and tears that never fully dried. She dressed quickly, fingers clumsy on the buttons of her worn uniform, mind replaying every second in that storage room. The bruises on his arm, the fear in his blind eyes, the way his small hand had clung to hers, as if her touch was the only anchor he had left. She had promised she wouldn't let the queen keep hurting him. That promise burned hotter than fear, hotter than the knowledge that a human maid had no place interfering in royal matters, especially in secrets the queen would kill to protect. The palace began to stir. Boots scraped over stone, whispers threaded through corridors, torches hissed as they were replaced. Elena walked toward the upper wing with her basket of linens, pretending everything was normal. The closer she got to the royal quarters, the colder the air felt, as if the stones themselves remembered ancient battles and old blood. She forced her steps to stay steady, timing her breathing with them. Inhale, exhale, one foot after the other. She needed to see Adrian. She needed to know if he was still locked away in darkness. At the corner of the long corridor leading to the king's private chambers, she almost collided with another maid. Marta, older and sharp-eyed, placed a hand on Elena's arm, holding her in place for a moment. "Careful," Marta murmured, glancing around. No one else was nearby. "You almost walked straight into the guards' change. They don't like surprises." "Sorry," Elena whispered, clutching the basket tighter. Her palms were slick with sweat. Marta studied her with a frown. "You look pale. Did you sleep at all?" Elena forced a small smile. "Just long day yesterday. Too many rooms." Marta held her gaze a second longer, then sighed. "Keep your head down, girl. The queen has been in a foul mood. Some say she screamed at the king last night. Others say she broke every mirror in her chamber. When she's like that, it's always the servants who pay." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. If the queen had been upset, Adrian had probably paid too. Bruises, cold stone, locked doors. She swallowed hard. "I'll be careful," she said softly. She broke away, continuing down the corridor. The storage room door looked the same as yesterday, slightly open, forgotten. Her chest tightened. She glanced around, then slipped inside, closing the door gently behind her. The room smelled of dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic. "Adrian," she whispered, voice low. "It's me, Elena." For a second, there was only silence. Then from the closet, she heard the scrape of movement. "Elena?" His voice was still small, but less broken than the night before. She rushed to the closet, opening it carefully. He was there, sitting against the wall, knees drawn up to his chest. His hair was more tangled, but someone had changed his clothes. The bruises on his arms had darkened. She knelt in front of him. "Hi," she said gently. "I brought you something." From her apron, she took a small piece of bread and a folded napkin with dried fruit she had hidden from the kitchen. His nose twitched, and a hint of hunger flickered across his face. "That's not human food," he said, almost apologetic. "Not really." "I know," she answered, keeping her tone light. "But you can still taste it. And it's something that belongs to you, not just whatever they decide." She placed the fruit in his hand. His fingers brushed hers, warm and unsure. Slowly, he raised it to his lips and bit. His face softened. "It's sweet," he murmured. "I like it." Elena smiled. For a moment, the cold room felt less hostile. "Does your father ever bring you things?" she asked, careful with her words. "Food? Gifts?" Adrian went quiet. He set the fruit in his lap, fingers tightening around it. "He visits sometimes," he whispered. "Not here, when she lets me stay in my room. He talks about the stars, even though I can't see them. His voice is warm, but when she walks in, he stops. Everything turns cold." Elena imagined the mighty king, centuries old, with power enough to command armies and bend laws, yet somehow blind to what happened under his own roof, or pretending not to see. She didn't know which was worse. "Why does she hate you?" Elena asked softly. Adrian's expression shifted, a shadow passing over his face. "Because I'm not hers," he said. "My mother died when I was a baby. The king married her later. She says I remind her that she wasn't his first choice, that I'm broken, that I ruin the image of the royal family." His voice cracked on the last words. Elena's throat tightened. "You are not broken," she said firmly. "Your eyes may not see like hers, but that doesn't make you less." He turned his head slightly toward her, as if trying to look at her with his other senses. "When you speak," he said, "it feels like light." The words were simple, but they pierced her. No one had ever said anything like that to her either. From somewhere down the corridor came the faint clank of armor, the echo of heavy boots. Adrian stiffened, instinctively shrinking backward. Elena's pulse jumped. "It's not her," he whispered quickly. "Different scent. Guards." His senses guided him like an invisible map. "They're going toward Father's council chamber." Elena leaned closer. "Do you always know where everyone is?" "Mostly," he replied. "Their steps, their breathing, the way the air changes. The queen smells like cold roses and silver knives. You smell like soap and warm bread." A shy smile touched his lips. "I like your scent better." She let out a small, nervous laugh, then pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Adrian, would you like to leave this room? Just for a little while?" He froze. "I'm not allowed." "I know," she whispered. "But I can take you somewhere no one goes at this hour. We'll be careful. You can feel the sun on your face through a window. You've been locked in here for too long." He hesitated, every line of his body caught between fear and longing. "What if she finds out?" "Then I'll say it was my idea," Elena answered. "Because it is. You'll say nothing. You'll let me take the blame." He tilted his head. "Why would you do that for me?" She thought for a moment, feeling the weight of her own past press against her ribs. "Because once," she said, "I was locked away too, not in a closet, but in a life where no one saw me. Someone opened a door for me. I know what it means to breathe again." The silence that followed felt thick, charged. Then Adrian nodded, the smallest, bravest motion. "Okay," he whispered. "Take me out." Elena helped him stand, his fingers gripping her forearm. He was light, too light for a royal child. She guided his hand to her elbow. "Hold on to me," she instructed. "If I stop, you stop. If I squeeze your arm, it means be quiet." He nodded, lips pressed tightly together. They slipped out of the storage room, closing the door with slow, careful hands. The corridor was nearly empty. Only distant voices and the low hum of palace life drifted through the air. Elena walked with calm, measured steps, as if she had every right to be there with a boy by her side. Adrian walked in perfect sync with her, his bare feet silent on the cold stone. She led him down a side hallway, one most guards ignored because it led only to an old balcony long closed to visitors. Dust coated the railings, and cobwebs clung to the corners. But beyond the dirt, there was something precious, a tall window, its glass thin, letting in the pale morning light. When they reached it, Elena stepped aside slightly, guiding Adrian's hands to the cool stone of the wall, then to the frame of the window. "We're here," she said softly. "Feel it." He stretched his fingers, tracing the edges, then pressed his palms flat against the glass. His face tilted up. The light fell over him, weak but real, touching his skin. He inhaled sharply. "It's warm," he breathed. "I can't see it, but I feel it. It's like the air is softer here." Elena watched him, a lump forming in her throat. "That's the morning," she whispered. "You deserve to feel it every day." He leaned his forehead against the glass, eyes closed. For a moment, he looked peaceful. Not a hidden prince, not a prisoner, just a boy meeting the world in the only way he could. Then, from the far end of the corridor, a voice cut through the quiet. Cold, sharp, familiar. "What do you think you're doing?" Elena's blood ran cold. She turned slowly, heart crashing against her ribs. The queen stood there, eyes blazing, lips pressed into a thin line. Her gown whispered against the floor as she advanced, the scent of cold roses hitting Elena like a warning. Her gaze slid from Elena to Adrian's small figure at the window. In that single heartbeat, Elena understood. She had not just broken a rule. She had declared war. Elena's legs felt like stone as the queen advanced, every step a threat wrapped in silk. The corridor seemed to shrink around them, the thin morning light suddenly fragile against the weight of the queen's presence. Adrian's hands were still on the glass, but his body had gone rigid, his head tilting down as if he could already feel the storm moving toward him. He didn't need sight to know who was there. The air itself changed when she entered a room, colder and sharper, like the moment before lightning struck. "What?" the queen repeated, her voice low and poisonous. "Do you think you are doing?" Her eyes burned into Elena first, measuring, dissecting, collecting every detail like evidence. Then her gaze snapped to Adrian, standing by the window, no longer hidden in a closet, like a secret she could deny. For a second, a flicker of pure hatred twisted her perfect features, so quick it almost vanished. Almost. Elena swallowed hard and forced herself to step slightly in front of Adrian, just enough to be noticeable, but not enough to appear defiant. "Your Majesty," she whispered, bowing her head. "I was only bringing him some fresh air. He seemed weak. I thought—" "You thought?" the queen cut in, each word like a slap. "You are a maid. You are not paid to think. You are paid to obey." Her heels clicked sharply as she closed the distance. The scent of cold roses mixed with a metallic undertone that made Elena's skin prickle. The queen stopped so close that Elena could see the faint red shimmer in her pupils, the mark of ancient blood. Adrian's fingers searched blindly for Elena's sleeve, gripping it with quiet desperation. The queen noticed. Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "How touching," she murmured. "The little stray has found a pet human." She leaned closer to Elena, voice dropping. "Did you truly believe you could move him without anyone noticing? His scent lingers like smoke. I can smell him from the other side of the palace." Elena's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "He is the king's son," she said softly. "He deserves more than darkness and dust. If he were stronger, he would reflect better on the royal family." She knew she was playing with fire, but she also knew something about the queen. Her pride was as large as her cruelty. Appeal to the image, not the child. The queen's eyes narrowed. For a brief moment, something like consideration flickered there. Then it vanished beneath ice. "Do not speak of what he deserves," she said. "You know nothing of this family, nothing of our needs." Her gaze slid back to Adrian, who stood trembling, his chin lowered. "Go back to your room. Now." Adrian did not move, His grip on Elena's sleeve tightened. "Please," he whispered, barely audible. "I don't want to go with you." The words were soft, but in the silence of the corridor, they rang loud. The Queen's jaw clenched. "You will do as you are told," she hissed. She extended a hand, fingers curling slightly, and for a moment Elena thought she might drag him away again. Something inside Elena snapped. Before she could stop herself, she stepped fully between them, shielding Adrian with her body. "Your Majesty, it was my fault," Elena said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. "I insisted. I told him it was safe. If you must punish someone, punish me. Leave him out of it." Her knees felt weak, but her voice held. She did not move aside. The Queen stared at her as if she were a creature that had crawled out of the earth. "You forget your place," she said, almost whispering. "Humans die very easily in this palace, Elena. Servants disappear all the time. A fall down the stairs, a sickness, a simple mistake." Her smile did not reach her eyes. No one would question it. Behind her, Adrian's fingers dug into Elena's arm until it hurt. She didn't pull away. "Then say it was my fall," Elena replied, surprising herself with her own courage. "Say it was my mistake. But if the king ever asks why his son is weaker each season, why he flinches at every sound, I don't think he will accept accidents as an answer." The Queen's expression flickered. For the first time, Elena saw something like caution in her eyes. The king, the one person whose opinion mattered more than hers, whose love she had never fully secured, no matter how many jewels she wore or councils she controlled. Elena pressed gently. "You've hidden it well," she continued softly. "But if he starts asking questions, if someone tells him what happens when he leaves the palace—" The tension in the corridor thickened until it was hard to breathe. The Queen's face smoothed into a cold mask. "Are you threatening me?" she whispered. "No," Elena said immediately. "I'm begging you, let him have a little light, a little space. He can still be something you're proud of. He just needs a chance." She did not add, "And I'll help him become that." The Queen didn't need to know the whole truth. Silence. The Queen's gaze slid from Elena to Adrian, and for the first time, she looked at him not as a stain, but as a problem that might have another solution. Her lips pressed together. "Fine," she said at last, voice clipped. "He will return to his room, with restrictions." She turned her eyes back to Elena. "And you will be reassigned." Elena's stomach dropped. "Reassigned?" she echoed. The Queen smiled thinly. "You wish to be so close to the royal family? Very well. From this day on, you belong to the king's service. You will manage his chambers, his robes, his private study, and whenever he asks about his son, you will say that everything is as it should be. Do you understand?" The trap was clear. Keep the king blind. Silence him with soft, curated lies. But it was also an opportunity. Elena felt Adrian's hand slip from her sleeve, hovering uncertainly in the air. "Yes, Your Majesty," she said slowly. "I understand." "Good," the Queen replied. She turned to Adrian and grabbed his wrist, not as hard as before, but still with ownership. "Come." Adrian took a step forward, then hesitated. His blind eyes turned toward Elena. "Will you still visit me?" he whispered. The Queen's fingers tightened slightly. Elena met his pale gaze, her throat thick. "If I can," she said, putting all the promise she could into those 3 words. "I won't forget you, Adrian." It was not enough, but it was all she could say under the Queen's watch. The Queen pulled him away, down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in uneven rhythm. For a second, Adrian twisted his head back toward the faint warmth of the window, then toward the sound of Elena's breathing, as if trying to hold both in his memory. Then they disappeared around the corner. Elena stood alone, the corridor suddenly enormous and empty. Her legs trembled, and she leaned against the wall, pressing her palm to the cold stone. Fear coiled in her stomach, but under it, something else burned brighter. Determination. Now she would be closer to the king, closer to the heart of the palace, and closer to the truth. If the Queen wanted to use her as a shield, Elena would let her believe it. But in her own heart, she made a silent vow. One day, the king would know what his son had endured. And when that day came, the darkness that ruled the palace would tremble. Elena's first day in the king's service began with silence. Not the heavy, cruel silence of the closet where Adrian had been locked, but a controlled quiet, full of unspoken rules. The king's private wing felt different from the rest of the palace. The torches burned a little brighter, the stone floors gleamed, and the air carried a faint scent of parchment and iron, rather than fear. Still, Elena felt watched with every step, as if the walls themselves had eyes loyal only to the queen. She arrived at the king's chambers before sunset, as instructed. 2 guards in dark armor stood at the door, their faces hidden behind polished helmets. One of them looked her up and down, then opened the door with a slow, heavy motion. Inside, the room was larger than any place she had ever entered. Tall windows were covered with thick curtains, blocking the sun, but thin threads of light escaped and painted pale lines on the floor. A long table stood near the center, covered with maps, letters, and a large metal goblet that still smelled faintly of blood. The vampire king stood with his back to her, facing a map pinned to the wall. He was taller than she had imagined, his dark hair falling in waves over his shoulders. His clothes were simple for someone of his status, a deep black coat with silver embroidery at the cuffs. Power clung to him like a second skin, quiet but undeniable. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady, the kind of sound that gave orders to armies and calmed storms. "You are the new maid," he said without turning, "assigned to my service." Elena bowed her head, keeping her eyes lowered. "Yes, Your Majesty. My name is Elena." Her heart beat fast, but her voice stayed steady. She could feel his attention shift to her even before he turned, like a weight pressing gently on her chest. When he finally faced her, she saw eyes the color of deep wine, old and tired, but still sharp. For a second, she wondered how those same eyes could fail to see his own son's suffering. He studied her, as if reading the truth in her posture, in the way she held her hands. "You served in the lower wings before," he said. "You are new to the palace, are you not?" She nodded lightly. "Yes, Your Majesty. I arrived a few months ago. Not long enough to become invisible, but long enough to see too much." She did not say that part aloud. The king moved closer, his steps slow and measured. "My queen recommended you," he continued. "She said you are obedient, discreet." The way he said the word discreet made Elena's stomach twist. The queen was already shaping the story. "I do what I am told," Elena replied carefully, "and I try to do what is right for the palace." It was the closest she could come to the truth without stepping off a cliff. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once. "You will prepare my quarters, manage the cleaning of this wing, and assist with my robes and armor when needed. You will also report any disturbance or strange behavior in the palace." His tone shifted slightly, "especially involving my son." Her heart stumbled. She had not expected that. "Yes, Your Majesty," she answered softly. "Of course." He looked away, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Adrian is delicate," he said. "The queen says he struggles to adapt, that he prefers solitude. I have tried to encourage him, but he avoids me lately. I fear my presence unsettles him." Elena felt anger flare under her ribs. "Avoids you, locked away from you." The lies tasted bitter in her mouth. "He is a child," she said gently. "Sometimes children avoid what hurts, not what they dislike." The king's eyes returned to her, sharper now. "Have you seen him?" The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Elena chose her words with care. "Only at a distance, Your Majesty," she said. That at least was partially true. "He seems quiet, lonely. But when I passed near his door once, I heard him humming softly to himself. It sounded kind." She did not mention the closet or the bruises. Not yet. Not without a way to protect Adrian from the storm that would follow. A faint sadness crossed the king's face, so quick she almost missed it. "He takes after his mother," he murmured. "She had a gentle heart. The world was not kind to her. I had hoped this palace would be kinder to him." Elena's fingers curled around the edge of her apron, nails pressing into the fabric. "Sometimes kindness does not come from walls or crowns," she said softly. "Sometimes it comes from people who decide to see what others ignore." The king looked at her with new interest, as if surprised by the weight of her words from someone with no title. "You speak boldly for a maid," he observed. "Are you not afraid of saying the wrong thing?" She swallowed. I am, Your Majesty, but I am more afraid of saying nothing when it matters. For a moment the room felt smaller, more intimate, as if they were two people instead of king and servant. A knock broke the tension. The Queen's voice floated through the door, smooth and cool. My love, may I enter? Elena stiffened. The king straightened. Come in, he called. The door opened, and the Queen glided in, dressed in a gown the color of midnight, with threads of red shimmering like veins. Her eyes took in the scene in a single glance. Elena standing near the table, the king facing her with a faint frown. I see your new maid has arrived, the Queen said, smiling with perfect lips. I chose her myself. She has a calm presence, do you not think? Her tone was light, but her eyes were hard as glass when they rested on Elena. Elena felt the warning there. Say nothing. Remember your place. The king nodded slowly. She is interesting, he said, and observant. His gaze flicked to Elena again. I was just asking her if she had noticed anything unusual in the palace. The Queen's smile did not waver, but Elena saw her jaw tighten slightly. And has she? The Queen asked. Elena felt her throat tighten. For a heartbeat, the image of Adrian in the closet flashed before her eyes. The bruises, the trembling. She took a slow breath. I have noticed, she began, that the palace is full of corners no one looks at, rooms no one enters, people no one hears. She chose every word like a step on thin ice. Sometimes, I think there are stories here waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The king's eyes softened, curious. The Queen's narrowed. Poetic for a servant, the Queen said, her voice smooth as stone, but hardly useful information. She walked closer to her husband, resting a hand on his arm. My love, we have more pressing matters than the imagination of maids. The council awaits you tonight. The southern clans are restless again. The king exhaled slowly. Yes, I know. He glanced at Elena one last time. You may go, Elena. Prepare my chamber for the night, and if you ever do notice something truly important. He paused. I expect you to tell me. Elena bowed her head. Yes, Your Majesty. As she walked past the Queen, she felt the weight of those cold eyes on her like claws. But beneath the fear, a thread of hope tightened inside her. The king had opened a door, even if he did not yet know it. Now she just had to decide when to walk through it. Elena walked through the dim corridor with quick but careful steps, her breath shallow as she listened for every echo. Since being reassigned to the king's service, the Queen's eyes seemed to follow her everywhere, sharp and waiting for one mistake to turn into punishment. But tonight, Elena carried something stronger than fear, a decision. She couldn't leave Adrian alone any longer, not after seeing how the Queen tightened her grip on him that morning, dragging him away with a smile too smooth to be real. Something was changing in the palace, something that made the Queen restless and the king distracted. And Adrian, as always, was the one paying the price. She reached the side hallway that led to the storage room, a place no guard cared to patrol, a place where secrets hid easily. Elena pushed the door open with practiced quiet, letting the faint smell of dust greet her. Adrian? She whispered softly. She expected silence or a soft answer, but instead she heard a sharp intake of breath, then the sound of someone scrambling to stand. She rushed forward. Adrian had been sitting on the floor, his back pressed against the wall, his small body trembling with the effort of holding himself upright. I thought, you wouldn't come, he murmured, his voice thin and frayed. She said, humans forget quickly. Elena knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. His skin was cold, colder than yesterday. I would never forget you, she whispered. Never. His clouded eyes lifted toward the sound of her voice, and for the first time in days, a fragile hope flickered there. Today was worse, he said quietly. She kept me in the dark room longer. She says Father won't care if I disappear. Elena's heart twisted. She wanted to scream, to run to the king and shake the truth into him. But she had seen how deeply the Queen had buried her lies. One wrong move would cost Adrian dearly. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in her place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills. Elena took Adrian's hands, steadying them. Listen to me, she said. I won't let anything happen to you, not while I'm here. His fingers curled weakly around hers. But how? He whispered. She watches everything. She hears everything. Elena glanced around, making sure they were alone, then leaned closer. Because I'm not the only one who sees what she's doing. The king sees more than she thinks. He asked about you today. Adrian's breath caught. Did he sound angry? He asked hesitantly. Not at you, Elena answered. At himself. At something missing. He feels the distance she forced between you, even if he doesn't understand why. Adrian lowered his head, his silver hair falling over his forehead. I want him to know, he murmured. I want him to see me. But I don't want him to fight with her because of me. Elena brushed his hair back gently. You are not the reason she's cruel, she whispered. Her cruelty belongs to her alone. The words settled into the quiet room like a truth neither of them had dared to speak before. Adrian drew a shaky breath. Elena, can I stay here for a little longer tonight? Just not in the dark. She nodded immediately. You'll stay as long as it's safe. She stood and closed the door softly, then lit the small lantern she had brought hidden in her apron. The warm glow filled only a corner of the room, but Adrian's face eased slightly, as if the light soothed something deep inside him. He reached toward it, feeling the gentle heat on his fingertips. It feels alive, he whispered. Elena sat beside him, letting the silence become comfortable rather than frightening. I wish you could see it, she said softly. It's gold and warm, like morning. Adrian smiled faintly. Describe it to me. So she did. She spoke of sunrises over the palace walls, of the colors she remembered from her childhood before life became all work and survival. Adrian listened with a stillness rare for him, as if storing every word inside the darkness where sight should have been. After a while, he leaned lightly against her shoulder. I didn't know stories could make things feel real, he murmured. Elena swallowed hard. Sometimes stories are the only real things we have, she said. The only things no one can lock away. A sudden sound echoed down the hall, a soft, distant click, like a latch being tested. Adrian stiffened immediately, his senses sharpening. Someone's coming, he whispered. Elena rose quickly, extinguishing the lantern with a swift motion. She pulled Adrian gently behind a stack of crates. The footsteps grew closer, slow and deliberate. Elena held her breath, pressing a hand on Adrian's back to keep him still. The door creaked open. Someone stepped inside. The scent reached Adrian first, different from the queen's cold roses, sharper than a guard's iron. He leaned close to Elena and whispered so faintly she barely heard it. It's the king. Her heart stopped. The king stood in the doorway, breathing slowly, as if searching the air for something he couldn't name. Elena stayed frozen, unsure whether revealing herself would save them, or doom them both. Because if the king saw them together in this forbidden room, one truth would finally become impossible to hide, and the queen's lies would start to crack. The king stepped deeper into the room, each footfall slow and weighted, as if he were following a thread only he could sense. The faint moonlight from the hallway traced the edge of his silhouette, casting long shadows that stretched across the dusty floor. Elena pressed her palm gently between Adrian's shoulder blades, urging him to stay still. His breathing was thin, but controlled. He was listening, truly listening, mapping the space with senses sharper than sight. The king paused near the center of the room. Elena saw his hand brush lightly over a crate, fingertips collecting dust. He frowned. Someone has been using this place, he murmured to himself. His voice, though low, held a note of confusion rather than suspicion. He took another step, closer now, close enough that Elena could hear the faint rustle of his coat. She tightened her grip on Adrian's arm. If the king found them, the queen would know. And if the queen knew, Adrian's suffering would only grow. But the king did not search. Instead, he stood there, silent, as if listening to something inside his own mind. Adrian, he whispered so softly the name almost broke. Elena felt Adrian flinch. The boy's lips parted in instinct, recognition, longing, but he stayed quiet, holding himself still with a strength Elena knew cost him dearly. I know you're afraid of me, the king said, still not turning. But I don't know why. His voice trembled, barely, like a man admitting a truth he had avoided for too long. I feel you slipping away from me. Every season you grow more distant. The Queen says you need discipline. She says you need silence. He exhaled slowly. But I hear your heartbeat in the walls at night, fast and frightened. A child should not sound like that. Elena closed her eyes. The king did know. Not the truth, not the closet, not the bruises. But he knew something was wrong. He felt his son's fear the way vampires felt shifts in the wind. Subtle, undeniable. Adrian swayed slightly, emotion tightening the line of his shoulders. Elena steadied him with a hand on his arm. He loves you, she whispered so softly it was barely breath. He's trying. The king placed both hands on the old table, leaning forward as though the weight of his thoughts dragged at him. Adrian, if you can hear me, I'm sorry. The words were quiet and cracked, slipping into the room like a confession he could say to no one else. I should have protected you better. I should have questioned more. His jaw tightened. And I will. Soon. Elena's heart quickened. Soon. Did that mean he suspected the Queen? Did he sense the lies? Adrian's fingers trembled against the crate, his blind eyes glistening with emotion he could not show. He took a breath, opened his mouth, and Elena pressed her hand softly to his, warning him. Not yet. Not here. Not with the Queen's spies everywhere. The king lingered a moment longer, his face carried in pain Elena had never imagined on a ruler said to be unbreakable. Then he straightened, quietly turning toward the door. Wherever you are, he said into the dim light, I hope you know I would never let anyone harm you. Not if I knew. The words hit Adrian like a blow. Elena felt it through the way his body folded inward. Please, the king whispered, come back to me. He left. The door closed silently behind him. For a long moment, neither Elena nor Adrian moved. The quiet felt wider than the room itself. When Adrian finally breathed again, it came out uneven, like a sob swallowed too late. Elena knelt beside him. He cares for you, she said softly, more than you knew. Adrian leaned toward her voice, shaking. I wanted to answer him, he whispered. I wanted to say his name, but I was scared. Elena took his hands gently. You did the right thing. If the Queen found out you met him here. She didn't finish. Adrian understood. He wiped at his face with the back of his hand, though there were no tears. Vampires seldom cried like humans. Elena, he whispered, I don't want to be afraid anymore. She brushed his hair back, letting her hand linger. Then we'll make a plan, she said. Something safe. Something that brings you close to your father, without the Queen tearing you apart for it. Adrian tilted his head. A plan? Yes, Elena said. But it has to start small. We need the king to trust me. Truly trust me. Once he does, I can put you where he can see you. Not as a secret, not as something wrong. He hesitated. And the Queen? Elena's jaw tightened. We'll stay ahead of her, she said. One step. Just enough. Adrian leaned gently against her shoulder, exhaustion settling into his small frame. Do you think I can ever be safe? He whispered. Elena wrapped an arm around him, holding him as tightly as she dared. Yes, she said, because you won't be alone. Not anymore. The lantern remained unlit at their feet, forgotten in the dark. But something warmer than fire filled the room. A beginning, a promise, and the first quiet crack in the Queen's perfect walls. Elena stayed awake long after the servants' quarters went quiet, lying in her narrow bed with her thoughts swirling like unsettled dust. The king's words, whispered into that dim storage room, would not leave her. I would never let anyone harm you. Not if I knew. He meant it. She had felt the truth in his voice. But knowing the truth and acting on it were not the same. Not while the Queen watched every corridor and every breath. Not while Adrian was treated like a stain she wished to erase. Elena turned onto her side, staring at the faint moonlight creeping across the ceiling. She had a plan. Pieces of one, at least. If the king trusted her fully, she could bring Adrian into his path in a way the Queen couldn't twist or hide. But trust from a vampire king was not easily earned, especially by a human servant. She needed timing, she needed caution, and she needed courage. By the time dawn brushed the sky in pale silver, Elena had barely slept, but she rose with new determination. She washed quickly, tied her hair neatly, and headed for the king's wing with her usual basket of linens. Everything had to appear normal, predictable, invisible. The king's chamber door was slightly ajar when she arrived. Unusual. She knocked softly anyway. "Your Majesty?" a low voice answered. "Enter." She stepped inside and found the king seated by the large wooden table, a scroll unrolled before him. His expression was thoughtful, his thumb tracing the edge of a small emblem, a crest she didn't recognize. His gaze lifted to her, and she felt again that strange intensity in the air, as if he sensed something shifting inside her. "Good morning, Elena," he said. His tone was calm, but something in his eyes was not. "You're early. I wanted to prepare the room before the council arrives," she replied, bowing her head. "There's much to organize." He watched her a moment longer than necessary. "You remind me of someone," he murmured. "Someone from long ago." She froze, unsure how to respond. But he didn't elaborate. Instead, he leaned back slightly. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about corners people ignore." She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "Sometimes the truth hides there," she said softly. He nodded once. "Yes." Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Elena, do you fear me?" Her breath hitched. No ruler, human or vampire, asked such a question lightly. She held his gaze, steadying herself. "You are powerful, Your Majesty. Anyone would fear you a little, but I don't fear the kind of man you are." His expression shifted, something tightening in his chest. "And what kind of man do you think I am?" Elena hesitated. Then, "A man who feels more than he lets himself show." Silence filled the room like rising water. The king looked down at the emblem on the table, his jaw shifting with thought. "Feelings," he said quietly, "are dangerous in a palace built on alliances." He rose slowly, stepping toward her. "I've seen what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness." She swallowed. "Kindness isn't weakness, not when it's all someone has left." The king's eyes softened, just slightly, but enough for her to feel the air warm between them. She had taken a risk, a big one, and something in him had heard it. Before she could speak again, a knock sounded at the door. A guard. "Your Majesty, the Queen requests your presence." The king's expression hardened again, slipping back into the mask of a ruler. "Tell her I'll join her shortly," he said. The guard bowed and left. The king turned to Elena. "Prepare my study," he instructed. "I'll return soon." When he left the room, Elena exhaled shakily. She had gotten closer than she intended. But she couldn't lose focus. Adrian needed her. She hurried through the next hours of work, her mind split between caution and strategy. When she finally had a moment alone, she slipped back into the side hallways, heart beating faster the closer she got to the storage room. Adrian was waiting for her. He was sitting against the wall, hands folded tightly in his lap, head tilted as he tracked her steps the moment she entered. "You came," he whispered, relief softening his voice. Elena knelt beside him. "Always." He touched her sleeve, his fingers trembling. "Elena, I heard something last night. The Queen was speaking with someone. She said the king is becoming suspicious." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Suspicious of what?" His voice quivered. "Of what she tells him, of why he doesn't see me, of why I'm kept away." Elena's breath caught. The Queen was losing control, and a queen desperate was more dangerous than one confident. "We need to move carefully," Elena said, "more carefully than before." Adrian swallowed hard. "What if she finds out I've been leaving the closet? What if she finds out about you?" Elena cupped his cheek gently. "Then we make sure she doesn't." He leaned into her palm, fragile as a candle flame. "Elena, if something happens to me, please..." "Don't say that," she cut in firmly. "Nothing will happen. Before we continue, tell me if you would have the courage to live a story like this, or if something similar has ever happened to you. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." Adrian took a shaky breath. "What do we do now?" Elena laced her fingers with his. "Now," she said, voice low and steady, "we begin the part the Queen can't control." He turned toward her voice, hope flickering like a spark. "And what part is that?" he whispered. Elena smiled softly, even knowing he couldn't see it. "The part where your father finally sees you." Elena knew the queen's grip over the palace was tightening. She felt it in the corridors, in the sudden patrols, in the way servants lowered their voices as if afraid the walls themselves might betray them. Something was shifting beneath the surface, and the queen sensed it, like a predator smelling the air before a storm. Elena needed to act before suspicion fell directly on her, or worse, on Adrian. She spent the morning preparing the king's study as instructed. Each movement was slow, precise, and purposeful. She dusted shelves filled with ancient books and maps, straightened the heavy curtains, and polished the silver crest that marked the king's lineage. But her mind was elsewhere, calculating the safest moment to bring father and son together. It had to be natural, unplanned, something the queen couldn't twist into a lie. As she adjusted the candles, the king entered quietly, dismissing the guards with a single motion. His expression held a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "Elena," he said, his eyes watching her with careful attention. "I spoke with Adrian's healer this morning." Her heart froze. "His healer, Your Majesty?" The king nodded. "She claims Adrian shows no improvement, that he's withdrawn, weak." His jaw tightened. "And yet, I remember him differently." He stepped closer. Livelier, curious, laughing once. The memory softened his tone. "Children don't lose themselves without reason." Elena felt her pulse quicken. The king had reached a crossroads, and she stood dangerously close to the truth he sought. "Sometimes children hide," she said carefully, "because no one protects the things they fear." The king's eyes sharpened. "Are you saying someone is harming him?" Her breath halted. One wrong word could destroy everything. "I'm saying," she answered slowly, "that Adrian needs someone who truly sees him." A heavy silence followed. The king studied her face as though searching for something she wasn't allowed to speak openly. "You speak as if you know him." "I see more than most," Elena whispered. "Sometimes that's enough." He looked away, pacing toward the tall window. "If I knew the truth," he said quietly, "I would tear apart the walls of this palace to free him." The promise in his voice was real, dangerous. Elena swallowed the knot in her throat. "Then maybe," she said, "look closer. Listen differently." He turned back to her, but before he could question her further, the door swung open. The queen glided inside. Her presence chilled the room instantly. "My love," she said with a smile sharpened at the edges. "The southern envoys have arrived early. They request your attention." The king's expression darkened. "I wasn't informed. I thought it best not to worry you until they were settled," she replied smoothly, stepping closer and looping her arm through his. "We must show strength, united strength." Her gaze flicked to Elena then, just a flicker, but full of warning. "Keep silent." The king pulled away from her touch. "I will meet them shortly." His tone was cool. He turned to Elena again. "Prepare my cloak." Elena moved to obey, feeling the queen's stare burning into her back. When she handed the cloak to the king, their fingers brushed, and a jolt of understanding passed between them. He knew she was hiding something, and she knew he was ready to hear it, soon. When the king left, the queen lingered. The silence stretched painfully. Finally, she spoke. "You're becoming bold," she whispered, her voice like frost over glass. "Too bold." Elena kept her head bowed. "I only serve the palace, Your Majesty." "Oh, you serve," the queen murmured, stepping closer. "But I wonder whom." She brushed a lock of Elena's hair from her face, her touch cold as marble. "Be very careful, Maid. You are a breath away from being swept out like dust." Elena did not move. "I understand, Your Majesty." The queen's smile widened. "Good. Then remember your place." And she swept out of the room. Only when the door closed did Elena exhale. She had no more time to waste. Later that afternoon, she slipped back to the storage room. Adrian was sitting cross-legged, head tilted toward the door even before she entered. "I heard your steps," he whispered. "They sound worried." She knelt beside him. "We're close," she murmured. "Your father suspects something. But your mother, she's not my mother," Adrian said sharply, a rare edge in his voice. Then he softened. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't." "No," Elena cut in gently. You're right. Adrian reached for her hand. What do we do now? She squeezed his fingers. We create a moment your father cannot ignore, a moment she cannot lock away. Adrian frowned. How? Elena leaned closer. Your father takes the Moon Hall passage every evening after council meetings. No guards, no queen. He walks alone. Adrian's breath quickened. And you want me there? Yes, she said. Just once. Just so he hears your voice, your steps, your truth. Adrian hesitated. I'm scared. She cupped his cheek. Courage is not being unafraid, she whispered. It's moving anyway. He inhaled deeply. All right. Tell me what to do. Elena's heart swelled with pride. I'll guide you. Every step. But before she could continue, she remembered the required message and whispered, Before we continue, tell me if you would have the courage to live a story like this, or if something similar has ever happened to you. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills. Adrian squeezed her hand. Elena, what will come next? She looked into his clouded eyes, her voice a soft promise. The night, she said, when everything changes. Elena waited in the narrow alcove just outside the Moon Hall, her heart pounding like a second pulse against her ribs. The corridor was dim, lit only by a few flickering lanterns that painted long shadows across the stone floor. This was the only place in the palace where the king walked alone. No guards, no council, no queen. If Adrian could reach him here, even for a heartbeat, nothing the queen did could hide it. Adrian stood beside her, his hand wrapped around her forearm, using her steady presence as his guide. His breathing was tight and shallow, his blind eyes wide with fear, but shining with determination. Is this really safe? He whispered. Elena tightened her grip. Nothing in this palace is safe, she murmured. But this is our best chance. I'll be right beside you. I won't let you fall. He nodded, though his fingers trembled. Together they stepped forward, moving quietly down the hall. Adrian's steps were careful and small, but Elena kept pace with him, guiding him with light touches. The air here felt different, quieter, almost heavy with memory. Adrian tilted his head. I recognize this place, he whispered. I heard father walking here once, when I was younger. Elena felt her throat tighten. Then this is where he should hear you again. They reached the center of the hall just as footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. The king. Elena turned to Adrian quickly. Stay here, just breathe. When he's close enough, say his name. Adrian swallowed hard. What if he doesn't want to hear me? Elena knelt slightly, placing her hands on his shoulders. He does, she said firmly. More than you know. The footsteps grew louder, steady, familiar. Elena stepped back just enough to stay hidden, but close enough to intervene if something went wrong. Adrian stood alone now, small and fragile in the vast hall. His fingers twitched nervously. The king came into view, his long coat brushing the floor, his expression thoughtful and tired. He walked with the quiet authority of someone carrying centuries on his shoulders. As he neared the center of the hall, he paused suddenly. His eyes narrowed. He sensed something. Adrian took a shaky breath. Father? His voice barely rose above a whisper, but in the silence it echoed like a plea carved into stone. The king froze. Slowly he turned. His eyes widened, not in anger, but in shock that softened instantly into something rawer. Adrian? His voice broke on the name. Adrian took a step forward, reaching blindly toward the sound. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to be bad. I didn't mean to hide. I just didn't know how to find you. The king stared at him, as though seeing him for the first time in years. He moved closer, hesitant, afraid the moment would vanish if he rushed. You're not bad, he said, voice thick. Never. Adrian's chin trembled. Then why am I always alone? The king stopped just in front of him, heartbreak written across his face. Because someone lied to both of us. From the shadows, Elena felt her breath catch. The truth had finally begun to crack open. The king knelt before Adrian, the great ruler of the Crimson Palace, reduced to a man desperate to understand the child he should have never lost. His hands hovered in the air, unsure if he had the right to touch his own son after so much distance. Adrian, he whispered. "Who told you to stay away from me?" His voice was gentle, but beneath it, Elena heard the growl of a truth ready to break free. Adrian reached toward the sound, his fingers brushing the king's sleeve. "She said you didn't want me," he murmured. "That you were ashamed I can't see, that I ruin everything." The king's expression darkened with a fury Elena had never seen in him, not violent, but wounded, betrayed. He closed his hand around Adrian's gently, grounding him. "My son, I have never been ashamed of you," he said. "Your blindness does not make you less. It makes you, you." Adrian's breath hitched, relief and pain tangling together. Elena watched from the shadows, her heart trembling with hope. The queen's lies were unraveling, and now the truth was finally standing face to face with the man who had the power to break her hold. The king rose slowly, keeping Adrian's hand in his. "Tell me," he said softly, "why you are alone so often. Where do you stay when I am gone?" Adrian trembled. In the dark rooms. Sometimes the closet near the back hall. She locks me there so I won't embarrass her." The words were small, but they hit the king like a blade. His jaw clenched, and the air around him shifted, old power awakening. "She has hidden you from me," he whispered, "and hurt you under my name." Elena stepped forward then, unable to stay in the shadows any longer. "Your Majesty," she said softly, though fear shook in her knees. "He never chose the distance. He never chose silence. He has been asking for you in every way he could." The king turned to her, eyes fierce but grateful. "And you," he murmured, "have been protecting him when I failed." The tension in the hall deepened as a new presence entered. Soft footsteps, a familiar cold scent. The queen appeared at the far end of the corridor, her expression calm only on the surface, but beneath it, panic flickered. "What is happening here?" she demanded. "Why is he out of his room?" The king stepped in front of Adrian, his stance unmistakable, protective, unyielding. "No more," he said. "I know what you've done." The queen's mask cracked. "You know nothing. I know enough." His voice cut like thunder. "And you will answer for it." For the first time, the queen stepped back. The king knelt once more to Adrian, cupping his face gently. "You will never be hidden again," he said. "Never." Adrian leaned into the touch, his small hands gripping his father's wrists with pure trust. The king looked at Elena. "You stay, by his side, by my side. You've earned that place." Her breath caught, but she nodded, heart full. Together, the three of them walked away from the shadows, toward the light Adrian had been denied for so long. A family, broken, but finally healing. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.